Order, please. We begin the day routine presenting reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. At this time, I'd like to table the end report for the period April 1, 2002 to March 31st, 2003 of the Public Prosecution Service. Statements by ministers. Government notice of motion. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 77th annual celebration of school sport luncheon is being held today at the World Trade and Convention Centre. And whereas this annual luncheon prior to the closing of the school year provides students and teachers with an opportunity to celebrate the role of sport in education while also acknowledging the tremendous contributions made by those involved. Whereas coaches will be recognized today when they receive Outstanding Service Awards, while student athletes will be presented with exemplary participation awards. Therefore, be it resolved, members of this legislature recognize the significant contributions made by both high school coaches and athletes across Nova Scotia and wish them nothing but continued success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. Notice of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia is the home province of Hank Snow, Anne Murray, and many other great stars of country music, and whereas Pictou County residents and all other Nova Scotians have been following George Canyon's successful appearances on the 2004 National Star Country Music TV program with growing interest, and whereas George Canyon of Pictou County is one of 3 finalists in the 2004 National Star competition, therefore be it resolved that this House expresses its best wishes to George Canyon on the eve of the National Star final selection and strongly encourages all Nova Scotians to give George Canyon their support and their votes for in the final round. Thank you. I'll ask for a waiver and passage for debate.
Agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Clare Acadien Midget A team participated in the SEDMA International Minor Hockey Tournament in Dartmouth from April the 8th to April the 11th, 2004. And whereas the team played against Truro in the Civic Division final. And whereas the SEDMA International Hockey Tournament is one of the largest and most respected multi-level hockey tournaments in North America, therefore it be resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate the Clare Acadien Midget A team and their coaches for winning the Civic Division final during the 27th annual SEDMA International Minor Hockey Tournament. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver, please.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Monsieur le Président, ultérieur, j'ai l'intention de proposer l'adoption de la résolution suivante. Attendu que l'Association de Radio Claire lance un nouveau site web appelé La Voix de la Nouvelle-Écosse mercredi le 28 avril 2004, et entendu que ce site nouveau comprend plus de 1500 participants représentant 9 régions à travers la province, soit Clare, Argyll, Richmond, Yarmouth, le Cap-Breton, Halifax et la Rive-Sud, Pumka et la Côte-Nord, Digby et la vallée Annapolis, Chéticamp, Inverness, Victoria, ainsi qu'une catégorie regroupant les organismes à l'échelle nationale et même internationale, et attendu que la Voix de Nouvelle-Écosse servira aux internautes comme un outil de recherche pour faciliter la localisation des entreprises privées et des groupes communautaires à travers la province, ainsi que des provinces avoisinantes. Qu'il soit résolu que tous les membres de cette Chambre félicitent et reconnaissent l'Association Radio Claire pour cette excellente initiative. Monsieur le Président, je demande l'adoption de cette résolution sans préavis et sans débat. Mr. Speaker, in English, I hereby give notice on future day to move the adoption of the final resolution. Whereas the Association Radio Claire launched a new website called La Voix de la Nouvelle-Écosse, that's lavoix.ca, on Wednesday, April 28, 2004, and whereas the new website is comprised of more than 1,500 participants representing 9 regions throughout the province, including Clare, Argyll, Richmond, Yarmouth, Cape Breton, Halifax and South Shore, Pumket, the North Shore, Digby and Annapolis Valley, Chéticamp, Inverness, and Victoria, and also includes national and even international organizations. And whereas La Voix de Nouvelle-Écosse will serve internet surfers as research tool to facilitate the location of both private businesses and community groups throughout the province, as well as its neighboring provinces. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House Assembly congratulate and recognize l'Association Radio Claire for this excellent initiative. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of motion.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Now a member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in addition to traditionally carrying groceries, hardware, and most of the dry good needs by local residents, the local village store also served as a meeting place to exchange news and ideas. Whereas the Freeze and Roy hardware store in Maitland is the oldest continually operated store in Nova Scotia, having opened its doors in 1839. And whereas Mr. Glenn Martin has purchased the store to prevent it from being torn down in order to preserve this piece of living history and is currently renovating it to restore some of its heritage and improve its viability as a commercial property. Therefore, be resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate Mr. Glenn Martin on his sense of community history and wish him well in his efforts to carry on the tradition of the Freeze and Roy store in Maitland. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the true heroes of our community services in this province are volunteers who give their time and energy and resources to do what they can to make life better for others. And whereas Wayne Roach has been a volunteer with the Lake Echo RCMP Community Office and the Black Cultural Centre Community Office for 7 years before his retirement, therefore be resolved that all members of this House honour Mr. Wayne Roach and all the individuals in detachment for their outstanding job of making our community a safer place to live. And I'd ask for waiver.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 90 years of service for home and country was recently celebrated by the Port Williams Women's Institute, and whereas the Port Williams Women's Institute was established in November 1913 and was one of the first branches in Nova Scotia, and whereas the organization was instrumental in the development of the Adopt a Highway program, as well as sponsoring safety day camps and working in local schools, therefore be it resolved, members of this House congratulate all the past and present members of the Port Williams Women's Institute on their 90th anniversary and recognize their many efforts over the years that have made the community a better place. I request waiver.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Stanley Graham of Rockfield, Pictou County, is today celebrating his 95th birthday, and whereas Stanley has been very faithful to his church community at West River Presbyterian Church, Durham, having served as elder, clerk of session, and superintendent of the Sunday school, and whereas Stanley has a strong interest in local history, having written books on both his community and his church, therefore be resolved that the members of this Legislative Assembly congratulate Stanley Graham on attaining this important milestone and wish him much health and happiness in the future. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the moratorium on applying biosolids to land has been extended for another 2 weeks until May the 15th, and whereas all approvals related to a land application of sewage, septage, and sludge and other biosolids remain suspended until further notice, and whereas municipalities have been requesting this and are the closest level of government to the people, this is a good exercise, a show of goodwill that the government will now extend the deadline. Therefore be it resolved that members of this House commend the Minister.
Order, please. Order, please. There's too much noise in the chamber. I'd ask the honourable members that they have to talk to take it outside, please. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes on the therefore be it resolved portion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Therefore be it resolved, the members of this House commend the Minister for listening to the concerns of all involved and extending the deadline another 2 weeks. Mr. Speaker, I ask waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas volunteers give so generously of their energy, skills, and family time and are the unsung heroes and the backbones of our communities. And whereas April the 18th to the 24th is National Volunteer Week, a week dedicated to honoring many volunteers who are the key to community success. And whereas Alexander G. Donaldson was recognized by the Halifax Regional Municipality as youth volunteer for many efforts in the community, including sponsor committee chair of the Dartmouth High School yearbook, the DHS Peer Drug Educators Program, service on the DHS Breakfast Program, participant in the DHS World Vision of Famine, grade 4 Sunday school at St. Paul's Church, altar server, and involvement in the youth ministry. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia Legislature recognize the important role volunteers play in our lives and pay tribute to Alexander G. Donaldson for his outstanding volunteer services, which has contributed to the well-being of the Dartmouth North community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contraminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Dana Bentley is a grade 9 student at Berwick School who has been guiding for 10 years, and whereas Miss Bentley has been chosen to represent Canada along with 14 other guides and pathfinders for a 10-day adventure with girl guides from around the world in Switzerland at our chalet. And whereas this is a phenomenal opportunity for Miss Bentley and the other girl guides and pathfinders to have a tremendous learning experience, explore another country, and make friends from around the world, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House recognize the accomplishments made by Dana Bentley and wish her a safe and enjoyable experience while she is in Switzerland. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contraminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth South Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Liberal Party issued a press release yesterday calling for more portable daycare spaces in Nova Scotia, and whereas nonprofit daycares benefit from assigned stable daycare spaces under the current operational funding formula for the province of Nova Scotia, and whereas the Liberal Party didn't tell Nova Scotians in its press release that portable spaces are funded at $4 less a day than dedicated childcare spaces, therefore be it resolved the Liberal Party, which also at one time called for higher taxes for low-income earners, reconsider its stand on portable daycare spaces and acknowledge the impact of its policies on those living in poverty in this province. I request waiver and passage without debate.
Here several noes. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice, and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas at the April 16, 2004, the Cape Breton Spring Fling, a gathering of musicians was held in support of local food banks. And whereas the show at the Savoy Theatre was attended by approximately 125 people. And whereas the initiative and dedicated efforts of 19-year-old Jerry Holland Jr. were instrumental in the show's resounding success. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this Legislative Assembly congratulate Jerry Holland Jr. for his commitment to our community and for being a fine role model for the youth of today. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contraminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Excuse me. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate.
Order, please. The honourable member knows full well not allowed any props in the House. That was a prop, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I'll table it too if you wish.
Honourable member Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Halifax Special Olympics hosted a 24-hour hockey marathon on January 31st and February 1st at the outdoor rink in Bootlers Point, and whereas local teams of all ages combined to raise $6,000 at that event, Whereas an added feature of the marathon was a game of ring hockey between a team of Special Olympians and provincial MLAs, at which we humbly received a true lesson of sportsmanship and fun. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the Special Olympic athletes and thank organizers Stephen Gilbert and Martin Gibson for their initiatives with Special Olympics. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Question for waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. Orders of the day, government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
I move that you deny leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole House on Supply.
It's agreed. Motion is carried.
What resolution is it?
Mr. Chairman, would you
I'll
please
recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, would you please call the estimates of the Minister of Education?
Call the estimates of the Minister of Education. I'll recognize the Minister of Education. I realize we have to wait for the staff to arrive, and we'll give the Minister a few moments to gather them.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to open the estimates debate for the Department of Education. Before I begin my comments today, I would like to introduce the staff who will be accompanying me in the House. They are, to my right, my Deputy Minister, Dennis Cochrane, whom I believe is known to virtually everybody. And on my left is Darrell Uden, who is the Senior Director, Executive Director of Corporate Services. I also, Mr. Chairman, have some staff in the balcony up there who will provide information if we need it, and they are Sue McKaig, who is our Director of Communications, and Bill Turpin, who was recently joined the communication staff in the department. This is my first time before the House in estimates as Education Minister, and it is somewhat rewarding for me to see that my career has returned me to the familiar world of teachers, students, classrooms, universities, community colleges, campuses, and the Department of Education. All of these spheres, Mr. Chairman, I had the privilege of having some direct association with.
Order. I wonder if you would allow an introduction. Thank you. The honourable member.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. Mr. Minister, we and members of the House, we have a distinguished guest from the Valley here today, Mr. Byung Lee. Mr. Lee is an example of exactly why we want to open Nova Scotia up to the world. He immigrated here from South Korea. He's a valuable member of our community, enriching us both culturally, socially, and economically. And Mr. Lee, if you would stand up and please accept the warm greetings from the House. Sure.
And greetings to all those watching the proceedings this morning. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, like other areas, the field of education has changed greatly over the past number of years. Indeed, in the number of years that I have been involved with it, I am amazed. It parallels, I suspect, health and community services and the changes that have taken place as it is presented in our province. I would like to acknowledge the employees of the Department of Education. They are a group of people who are solidly committed to providing quality education and training programs to Nova Scotians. And I want to, Mr. Chairman, take this opportunity to thank all of them for their continuing efforts on behalf of the people of Nova Scotia. Mr. Chairman, providing quality education and training programs is a shared responsibility. Staff work very hard throughout the year with our partners, including parents, teachers, school boards, the post-secondary education sector, partners in industry, and others. And keeping our partners informed and involved is critical as we work to provide a high-quality education system, a strong workforce, and a bright future for all Nova Scotians. And judging by some of the insightful questions we've had during question period since this House opened, not to mention the inquiries and comments from the press, it seems that our partners and those others interested in education are very well informed of what we do. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, during this time of year, and I guess it's because the House is open, coupled by the fact that we have school board elections and we are in a minority government, there are those who like to undermine our working relationship by focusing on some rather things that are rather minor in the whole scheme of education, such as the money used to provide coffee and other things for students and teachers and others who come as part of the working groups of the Department of Education. And I want to say, Mr. Chairman, that such comments really are a tremendous disservice to teachers and others who come to the department to partner and to try and make education better for our students. Yes, Mr. Chairman, we frequently host meetings and workshops for teachers, and we need their help to better serve students. And this includes helping us to develop curriculum and marking exams so we know how students are doing. We meet with board superintendents monthly. Program staff from across the province meet regularly with the department to share best practices and improve services to students. We meet with representatives of the community college, we meet with the post-university representatives, and we also meet with industry partners. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, we accomplish a great deal for our province by working with these people. We can't and we won't work in isolation. All education policy, curriculum, and good ideas can't come from the Halifax area. If education is to be a true partnership in our province, then we must have partners located throughout the province and have their ideas valued by government. I'm reminded, Mr. Chairman, at this time of a statement by Robert Stanfield. And he said this in relation to that: neither government nor its bureaucracy is as wise as they are apt to believe. Neither is the opposition, nor the press. And thus, Mr. Speaker, the need for partnerships with those who work in the field. Humility is a valuable strain, Mr. Stanfield continued, provided it does not become an excuse for resisting change, accepting injustice, or supporting vested interests. And Mr. Speaker, the fact that we have established so many partnerships in this province, it helps us adhere to this principle. Now, these partnerships do come at a cost, but it is money well spent, and we are accountable to the taxpayers for it. I believe, Mr. Chairman, it's important to remind the House that the Department of Education has a broad mandate. As outlined in our department's business plan, our mandate is one that spans the education and training system from pre-grade primary to all post-secondary and adult learning institutions. These destinations include adult education, apprenticeship, community college, private career college, university, and other venues supporting Nova Scotia's development. Other responsibilities of the department, Mr. Chairman, include public libraries, the Youth Secretariat, and immigration. Thus, I think it was very appropriate, Mr. Chairman, that Minister Morris took the opportunity to introduce one of those people who has come from another country to contribute to our province. The Department of Education has a budget of more than $1.2 billion this year to help us meet our mandated obligations. The majority of this money is allocated to our partners, and in particular, the school boards. This year's budget represents an increase of more than $23.3 million in education. We're investing more money at a time when public school enrollment is declining and at a time when the province is faced with limited financial resources. Clearly, Mr. Chairman, education is a priority of this government. As pleased as we are with the increase, I do appreciate that there will be some challenges to school boards, universities, and our other education partners, not to mention the students who are in higher education. However, working together, we will get through this difficult time. And I want to tell you, Mr. Chairman, that I had the pleasure of meeting with the board superintendents, the CEOs and directors of education, chairs and vice chairs last week to review and discuss their budgets. And as well, we have recently met with our partners in higher education, those at the university level and at the community college level. And I want to assure all Nova Scotians, Mr. Chairman, that these people are dedicated and they take what they do very, very seriously. And they work hard for their students. We had a candid conversation last week that focused on our shared responsibility to meet the needs of students. And I have every confidence that they will continue to do their best for children this fiscal year. Now, we will continue to work with school boards to help them manage their budgets and cost pressures while at the same time enabling them to continue to provide a quality education to students. One of our public school priorities this year, Mr. Chairman, is to revise the school board funding formula. We met with board chairs and superintendents in March to review our plans, and those plans are proceeding. Mr. Chairman, all school boards are funded on an equitable basis, that recognizes that school boards have different cost pressures. And we all agree that we need one funding formula that's equitable to all school boards and understandable to the public. Now, I want to emphasize, Mr. Chairman, that equitable does not mean equal. The cost of educating students varies from one part of our province to another, and boards should be funded according to what it costs to serve their students. And indeed, we are well aware that each school board has its own unique cost pressures, and we need a formula that responds fairly to all boards. For example, Mr. Chairman, a board with a large student population that is bused to school should get more money than a school board that doesn't have the same transportation demands. Thus, if we adhered strictly to per-student funding without acknowledging the board's different cost pressures associated with transportation, then some school boards would be underfunded for transportation, while others would have more money than they need. All school boards have been involved in developing the current funding formula over a number of years, and the boards will continue to be involved as we revise the formula in the 04-05 fiscal year. In this process, consultation, equity, adequacy, and accountability are some of the underlying principles. The transition plan for the new formula will also be developed this year, and we expect to start implementation of the formula in 05-06. I'm pleased to tell the members of this legislature, Mr. Speaker or Mr. Chair, that we are very close to making a public announcement of the person who will lead the formula funding review. It will be a person who is well known to a good many people to this House, and indeed has the respect of all Nova Scotians. Can I give his name? Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the person who has agreed to do that is Mr. Bill Hogg, who was the former Deputy Minister of Finance, and we're just delighted that he's agreed to assume this role. Mr. Chair, the school's public education system includes 442 schools, about 150,000 children, and about 9,500 teachers. There are 8 school boards, all of which have seen an increase in funding since 1999. In fact, since 1999, close to $94 million more has been invested in public education. And that's an increase of 15%. And indeed, our per-pupil funding has increased from $4,840 in 1999-2000 to $6,241 this year. This government, Mr. Chairman, is investing more money in our children's education at a time when enrollment is declining. If we have fewer students, it makes sense, in many cases, that we have fewer teachers. And this year, due to the fewer number of students, we believe that there will be 93 fewer teaching positions required. However, Mr. Chairman, there will be no job losses because, according to our projections, 508 teachers will retire. And members of the House will note the statement, I believe, in yesterday's Herald by Dr. Jim Gunn saying that very thing in relation to the number of teaching positions that would be reduced down in the Annapolis School Board. Because we have balanced the budget, it allows us to continue our investment in children's education. And this year, again, there will be more money to support children with special needs, to help children improve their reading and writing, and to reduce class sizes. This year's additional investment in public education will mean new and improved programs for students and help for boards to manage cost pressures. There is an increase, Mr. Chair, of more than $7.5 million to the 8 school boards to continue to increase the learning, or to implement the Learning for Life plan. This program, the Learning to Life plan, Mr. Chairman, now is funded annually on the basis to the tune of $12.4 million. Smaller class sizes will allow teachers to spend more time with each student. And last year, we invested $2.5 million through Learning for Life to reduce class size to a maximum of 25 students in primary. That funding continues for primary this year, and we are investing an additional $3.5 million to reduce the maximum class size in grade 1 to 25 students. In 2005, Mr. Chairman, we will expand this initiative again to include grade 2 students. In addition, combined primary grade 1 classes will have a maximum of 20 students, or there will be an additional adult in the classroom. And this criterion also applies to grades primary and grade 1 classes with students with special needs who have an individual program plan. Helping all children to succeed is a priority, Mr. Chairman. And our goal is to educate all students with special needs in our public schools. And we've increased the funding for school boards to do this job better. School boards have $48 million in targeted funding which they must spend on special education. They also allocate a considerable portion of the provincial funding to provide other services or additional service to students with special needs. In addition, government has made commitments through Learning for Life to ensure success for all students. And last year, we provided $2.5 million for school boards to hire professionals they need, like speech-language pathologists, school psychologists, and resource teachers. This money also helped train more teachers in reading recovery, moving us closer to the goal of making this effective reading intervention program available to every one student in the province who needs it by September 2004. The money also allowed each board to conduct pilot projects to explore new and better ways of serving students with special needs. Many of the boards chose to focus on helping students with behavioral challenges and hired additional staff for this. The school boards now have this $2.5 million in their base to maintain funding for the new staff hired in 2003-2004. And they also have an additional $3 million announced in our budget this year to hire and train more professionals and to continue pilot projects in 2004-2005. Mr. Chairman, to put this in context, last year, our increase in funding to the boards meant an additional 41 teaching positions hired in the equivalent of 16 new teaching positions for reading recovery. Mr. Chairman, with all of this support, we are confident that we can serve students with special needs well in our public school system. However, we recognize that there is a small number of students who may benefit from a short period of time with the specialized expertise of a private school. And Mr. Chairman, that's why we are developing a new tuition support program. And I want to be clear, Mr. Chairman, that I'm talking about tuition support, not tuition agreements. The provision in the Education Act for school boards to enter into tuition agreements with private schools will continue to exist. That's entirely at the discretion of school boards whether any of these agreements are made. Mr. Chairman, what we are doing this year is to provide another option. Through the Financial Measures Act, we're adding a provision for tuition support in addition to tuition agreements, which are in the Education Act. Tuition support will be a contribution towards private school tuition. The Education Act currently has no provision for this, so it must be added so this option can be offered. Now, the protocols for the tuition support program are still being developed. And at this point, we're looking at providing tuition support as an amount of funding equivalent to the annual provincial per-student funding grant. Parents would apply to access tuition support for a maximum of 2 years. School boards and private schools would be required to plan for each student to make a successful transition back to the public school system. We announced $200,000 in the budget to help with this program. part of that amount will be allocated for an arm's length ombudsman's office should there be different disagreements over the level of service. Some of it will be allocated for low-income families so that the ability to pay is not a barrier, and some will be used to assist in the transition of some students back to the public school system. Mr. Chairman, this program is not being designed for a large number of students. We have fewer than 150,000 students in our public school system, and only about 3% of them have individual program plans. In other words, only about 4,500 students have special needs to the extent that they can't follow the provincial public school program without help. Of those students on individual program plans, we estimate that about 1 to 2% may need access to the tuition support program, and that is somewhere between 45 and 90 students. And I mention this particularly, Mr. Chairman, because I want to dispel the myth that there are hundreds and hundreds of students who would benefit from the specialized services of a specialized private school. I'm confident that our public school system is serving all of our students well. We've been investing, and we will continue to invest in more support for students with special needs as we can afford to do so. As I said, Mr. Chairman, the tuition support program is still in development. We are consulting with our partners, and the processes and eligibility criteria will be finalized in regulations. Reading, writing, and math continue to be a priority. This year, we will move ahead with the vast majority of our initiatives to support students and teachers in those areas, and we will maintain the status quo in others. We were very pleased to be able to secure $1 million in new funding to help those students who didn't meet expectations in the recent literacy assessment. We're investing $1 million to help teachers give more support to students who did not meet expectations. Schools will get a share of the funding that is proportional to the number of students who need more support. And it will be the professional staff in the school and community members who will help decide how best this funding can be used to help their particular students. The Active Readers program will expand to grade 9, and we will invest $1 million in thousands of books for grade 9 classrooms and professional development for teachers. And there will be an additional $478,000 to add more reading resources to all junior high classrooms. About $500,000 will move Writers in Action into grade 6. Now, both the Writers in Action and the Active Readers programs provide professional development for teachers so that they can help students strengthen their reading and writing. The Jean Lectures Actif and Écrivains Love will continue and expand in Acadian schools. In addition, we will start working on moving Writers in Action into grade 10. We will also provide P-9 spelling resources and professional development for teachers. As in the past 2 years, we're investing more than $500,000 in school boards-based funding so that each board will continue to have a math leader who supports classroom teachers. And a further $645,000 will provide professional development for teachers. We will continue to implement the Time to Learn strategy with new minimum time requirements for math in grades 7 and 8. We will also invest $355,000 in resources for students, teachers, and parents, including homework baggies in primary and grade 1. In addition, Mr. Chairman, we are continuing to implement African Canadian Studies 11 and African Heritage Literature 12. And the department will continue to work with partners in implementing recommendations from the Black Learners Advisory Committee, and we will add $500,000 this year to support African Nova Scotian students in the public school system and to further implement the recommendations of the Black Report. Part of our Learning for Life plan includes a commitment to ensure students continue to learn in a safe and healthy environment. And to that end, we will spend over $400 million over the next 8 years to build new schools and support extensive renovation work. Mr. Chairman, the capital construction plan is based on the priorities of school boards. It means 19 new schools in additions and/or alterations to more than 50 schools. We have a solid, fiscally responsible long-term plan to fund education's capital projects. And this was critical for good, solid planning and to ensure completion of the work in a timely manner. This year, Mr. Chairman, we are investing just about $46 million for 12 new schools. There are 5 new school construction projects that are underway, and we expect these facilities to open in 2004-2005. These schools are Amherst Elementary, Truro Junior High, Sydney Elementary, Shelburne High, and Cumberland Elementary.
Good minister.
Planning and construction will begin for 7 additional school projects in 04-05, which are expected to open over the next 2 fiscal years. These are Hammonds Plains Elementary, Barrington High, the Western HRM High School, which received a strong endorsement from my good friend and colleague from Timberley Prospect, as well as our own members who have constituents in that area. The St. Patrick's Queen Elizabeth High, the Harborside Robert Jameson High, Truro West Elementary, and Rankin Education Center. In addition, we will invest $13.4 million for 21 renovation projects to improve existing schools across the province. Mr. Chairman, our schools play an important role, along with parents and community partners, in increasing our young people's physical activity. And healthy, active students are an important component of our Learning for Life plan. There is extensive research and evidence to support physical activity and healthy eating as essential to good health and learning. Most schools offer physical activity programs and some form of food services. Healthy eating and physical education are also part of the program of studies. We are working to empower children to make the right decisions. We want to make it easier for them to make healthy lifestyle choices. The prevalence of obese and overweight children in our schools is increasing dramatically. And indeed, Mr. Chairman, recent information suggests that about 2/3 of Canadian children are not active enough on a daily basis to gain any health benefits. Developing healthy eating habits and a physically active lifestyle are essential for children's well-being and to reduce the risk of developing chronic diseases, including obesity and type 2 diabetes. I said, I believe, in the House yesterday, I had met with the Canadian Pediatric Association a couple of days ago. One of the statistics that they presented to me, which was rather frightening, is that we are now raising a generation that, if things don't change, will not live as long as their parents. We're going to start to go back the other way. Now, Mr. Chairman, that's why my colleague, the Minister of Health Promotion, the Premier, and indeed all members of this government are making a commitment to try and make our children more active and more healthy. We believe that this year will allow us the opportunity to make a positive difference in the lives of our children and youth, to help more children feel good about themselves, and to have the information and support they need to choose an active and healthy lifestyle for today and tomorrow. Schools are nurturing environments for children. It's a safe place for them to explore and develop positive, lifelong skills and healthy attitudes. Schools are one of the best settings to promote a collaborative approach involving various community partners, including school staff, parents, community volunteers, for-profit and not-for-profit organizations to enable children to make smart lifestyle choices. There's solid research and evidence to support physical activity and healthy eating as essential to health and learning. And we look forward to continuing our work with the Office of Health Promotion on many initiatives, including implementing the Active Kids, Healthy Kids strategy to promote healthy, active living in many settings, including schools. Education is very pleased this year to be the lead department for the Children and Youth Action Committee. This committee was established to support government departments working together to collaborate and share resources, which will enhance efforts to support the youngest members of our community. Mr. Chairman, an unhealthy body cannot support a healthy mind. And this is an exciting time as we move forward with the projects to help promote the health and well-being of our students. Part of our efforts is to introduce a new community use of schools policy. Young Nova Scotians will have a more affordable access to school gyms and playing fields once the amendment to the Education Act, which has been introduced, is passed. It is part of the Learning for Life commitment to encourage more young people to be more active. And the amendment supports a new provincial policy on community use of schools. It will allow young people up to the age of 21 to use publicly owned school facilities for physical and recreation activities without rental fees. They will pay only for direct additional costs, including extra custodial services if they are needed. Now, we've worked with school boards and recreation partners on this policy. It was the key to ensure fair and reasonably consistent access to our schools for non-profit community groups, and particularly for youth across the province. Making our facilities more available is one of the many steps we're taking to help encourage more physical activity among Nova Scotia's young people. The policy also makes good use of schools as community resources. Community not-for-profit groups will have access to school facilities at a nominal rental fee to cover school board costs such as heat, electricity, and supervision. Turning now, Mr. Chairman, to the higher education sector. We are blessed in this province, Mr. Chairman, with 11 universities, with a community college that has 13 campuses, and they are complemented by about 45 private trade schools and career colleges. As I said yesterday, Mr. Chairman, Nova Scotia leads the country in the percentage of its 18 to 24-year-olds who access post-secondary education. Indeed, Mr. Chairman, we are 62% above the national average. One of the reasons for that, Mr. Chairman, is that government has continued to invest in students, universities, and the community college because we believe it will build a stronger Nova Scotia. We have the second highest university funding per capita in Canada, and we have increased funding to universities by 13% since 1998-99. Now, we understand and appreciate that universities are facing rising costs, and we appreciate they, like all agencies, have significant cost pressures. Government is continuing to invest in post-secondary education at a rate at which Nova Scotians can afford. We are, Mr. Chairman, investing more than $206 million in our universities this year. And they also received $8 million on March 31st, which they can use during the fiscal 04-05. And in addition, of course, Mr. Chairman, the universities will be the prime beneficiaries of the $5 million from the Office of Economic Development for Research and Innovation. Moreover, Mr. Chairman, my colleague, the Minister of Health, has a Health Research Foundation which is directly intended to promote health research, and of course the people that do that primarily are university researchers. And in addition, there is also money in the Gaming Foundation that also, most of the money that's accessed from there for research goes to universities. So what I'm trying to say, Mr. Chairman, although the base amount that's going to university is not what we would like or what the university would like, we work very carefully with them, and they understand the position that we are in, but I just want to point out that there is that additional money which enhances the research efforts of universities for them to access, and it comes from our government. We are also committed to working with the universities on a multi-year funding agreement. And this memorandum of understanding, once it's concluded, will give universities a 3-year guarantee for operating funding. And in return, we are discussing such important initiatives as reducing duplication, making it easier to transfer credits between universities and colleges, identifying and supporting programs in areas that address Nova Scotia's skill needs, and also to keep tuition increases to a minimum. We have also, through the Council of Maritime Premiers led by our Premier, working on a proposal to the federal government to help universities address the cost of maintaining their buildings. And I said the Council of Maritime Premiers. I want to correct myself. That group is now the Council of Atlantic Premiers, Mr. Chair. I just want to mention one other thing about the universities that is not all that well recognized outside of the university community, but it is the tremendous work that our universities in Nova Scotia do with other countries. You know, St. Mary's, Dalhousie, Acadia, St. Evax, UCCB, and indeed all of the universities, the Agricultural College in my constituency, all do significant international work. And one of the things that I learned last night, Mr. Chairman, when I was at Mount St. Vincent University at a function honoring a former long-time and extremely well-respected civil servant, Dr. Fred McKinnon, I was talking to Dr. Brown, the president of Mount St. Vincent Universities, and that university, its education school, has signed an agreement with the government of Jamaica to provide in-service training for all school principals in Jamaica. That is, you know, the type of international work that we are doing. And indeed, there are 55 school principals from Jamaica in Nova Scotia as I speak, working with the people at Mount St. Vincent to improve and to enhance their educational administrative skills, and of course with the benefit for Jamaican students. I would encourage all members, if you do get the chance to visit university campuses, to find out what they do internationally. it's really the international component of our higher education sector. It is good. We're selling skills and knowledge, or giving skills and knowledge to those who need it. We're helping developing countries, and in addition, of course, universities are getting some revenue from it. And I should not leave the community college out of that group too, because I know that the community college is working down in Mexico, among other places. So when we think of our universities serving only our own Nova Scotia needs, I think we also have to recognize that they are taking their leadership and their considerable skills and knowledges to the world. Mr. Chairman, we remain committed to our $123 million investment in the Nova Scotia Community College to provide more students access to the education they need for the jobs that they want. The college has received an increase of $3 million in operating funding, bringing its budget to about $74 million this year. I was looking at the community college statistics the other day, Mr. Chairman, and material which was released for them, and they do follow-up surveys every year, is that about 97% of their graduates are employed. Mr. Speaker, that's not bad for an institution that's just begun. And indeed, I said in this house the other day, I think the community college education in this province is a bargain. And I look at what the types of skills that they are developing in our young people, the types of industrial needs they are meeting, and obviously the high employment rate, I think certainly is good, solid evidence of my comment. Mr. Chairman, there was a recent study by the Maritime Provinces Higher Education Commission noting that university graduates saw their education, regardless of its cost, as an investment in their future. And if students need loans to complete their college or university education, they have access to Canada and Nova Scotia student loans. Recent federal announcements are encouraging that because the expected parental contribution for the student education is going to be reduced. And I want to say in front of this House, and in front of all Nova Scotians, it was the Department of Education, the Ministers of Education, who my colleague Mr. Angus McIsaac and former colleague Jane Purvis, who were largely instrumental in convincing the federal government, working with their colleagues, the Council Ministers of Education, to get that very positive change happen. And I'd like to say thank you to Minister McIsaac and those that worked with him in bringing that benefit to Nova Scotia students and Nova Scotia parents. Mr. Chairman, we pay the interest in those loans while students are in school, and this means that when they graduate, they pay the principal only. We also pay the interest for graduates who are having trouble with repayment. Students with Nova Scotia student loans now have access to our new student debt reduction program when they graduate. And this is a $5.1 million program designed to help the students with the highest debt with repayment. And indeed, Mr. Chairman, some students will be able to have as much as 40% of their student loan eliminated. More recently, the department placed ads in student and provincial papers and mailed notices directly to eligible students. We also followed up, where possible, with emails to students. And we're also working on an automated system to make the application process easier for students. And I encourage all eligible students to apply for that new program. Mr. Chairman, we continue to work with our partners across business, labor, and education training partners to build a skilled and knowledgeable workforce. Government faces the same challenges as other employers with an aging workforce, rapid advancement of technology, and process innovation. For our youngest Nova Scotians, newborns, we are expanding the Read to Me program to include more hospitals. And what this program does is it provides parents, a child's first and most important teachers, the resources they need to develop a love of learning with their children. And Mr. Chairman, I'm delighted to say that I had the privilege of attending a couple of the openings of Read to Me program, actually the one down in the Scotia Regional Hospital and the other one at the Aberdeen Regional Hospital. We have a number of shared initiatives in the Department of Education that help support the skills and learning of our youth. Programs and services include the development of a youth apprenticeship program, cooperative education opportunities, and a coordinated career development system of the province. As part of our commitment to narrow the skills gap, the Skills and Learning Branch is leading the development of a provincial immigration strategy to attract and retain skilled immigrants in our province. I believe the strategy will ensure that resources are in place to make an easy transition for immigrants. Mr. Chairman, we'll be releasing the Skills Nova Scotia Action Plan early this summer and a progress report on the 2003-04 Action Plan shortly after that. As part of our Skills Nova Scotia commitment, we have established a sector liaison program to ensure that we are working closely with business and industry to understand and meet their human resource and skill requirements. In recognition that our youth are our greatest asset, we will develop a strategy to help those youth who leave school early to develop meaningful job skills and then help them to successfully return to the education system. In addition, we're working with partners across the province to develop the labor market information required to ensure that our supply of skilled and talented workers are meeting the demands of business and industry, and that opportunities to start and grow business are highlighted. We will also continue to work with our partners under the Nova Scotia School for Adult Learning to provide more opportunities for adults to improve their literacy and numeracy skills and or get their high school diploma. Mr. Chairman, one other sector which I mentioned in passing that I would like to once again talk about is the private sector, the private education sector, and we have many first-rate private career colleges in this province, and they provide, they are an integral part of this province's education system. And indeed, Mr. Chairman, I know of at least one of these institutions whose curriculum has been adopted Canadian-wide, has set the Canadian standard, and that is the Commercial Safety College out in Masstown, which is in my colleague Bill Langel's constituency, and their truck driving curriculum is acknowledged as the best anywhere. Mr. Chairman, as you can see, we have an exciting year ahead. We will continue to work toward a high-quality education system, a strong workforce, and a bright future for all Nova Scotians. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Recognize the honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I was wondering if the minister could make available a copy to the House of his comments. I realize he, for a lot of his speech, spoke from a prepared text, and I would ask him if he could table that for members' interest, if he could, please. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Well, as I assume that will be done. First of all, Mr. Chair, I want you to know this is a unique opportunity for me because, and I'm sure it's a unique opportunity for the member from Hants East, as it will be for the liberal education critic, because as teachers, we have a wonderful opportunity to stand in this House and talk about something that's near and dear to our hearts. We also have the opportunity to bring up things that have been brought up to our attention by teachers. Teachers who call, teachers who email, and teachers who are regularly in contact and They want to know about this particular policy or that policy. So many of the things that I'm going to bring up over the next number of hours, the next number of days, I'm bringing forward on the behalf of teachers, parents, and in a couple of cases, students, their concerns about things that have evolved over the past year in the school system. So let's begin. On February the 17th, I wrote a letter to Vince Warner. I assume we know who Vince Warner is. For members opposite, Vince Warner is the Director of Testing and Evaluation. At that time, after a meeting that Joanna Redden from the staff of the NDP and I had with Vince, Mr. Warner, we were given a commitment that we would receive the questions that were deleted from the standardized test in grade 12 math. Now, the February 17th letter was followed up by a phone conversation that I had with Mr. Warner. And Mr. Warner assured me that eventually we would find out, and I think it's important for people who are watching this or members opposite, you know, and I'm going to ask the minister for this comment. I'm not going to go on at length on this because this is a real crucial issue. Did we actually have standardized grade 12 math tests in this province? And I can tell the answer. The answer is no. Because in certain schools across this province, if a particular teacher said, we're not going to do question 50, and you don't have to do question 12, and don't worry about question 35, they aren't responsible. You're not responsible for those ones at this particular grade 12 math class in whatever the school was. But if you went down the road or in the next system, you could find another math teacher who would say, you got to do them all. Or the math teacher would say, you don't have to do question 50, but you have to do everything else. Now, the question to the Minister of Education is this: is that a standardized test? Secondly, a standardized test that is marked by the teachers in that school. Now, I know that the Deputy Minister of Education, based upon his experience in another province, can tell us of how exams are mailed to the provincial capital, Fredericton in New Brunswick, and then the results are back. We did not have that in this province. Is that a standardized test? Those two questions deserve to be answered for parents and for children across this province. But more particularly, I'm looking forward to hearing from Mr. Warner, because if question 50 was deleted in, let's say, the majority of high schools in this province, I use it only as an example. Heaven knows, I don't know what question 50 was. I saw this math exam. You want an intimidating process? It was an intimidating process, in my opinion. But kids got to meet the standards, so let's go for it. But if question 50 is deleted in school after school after school after school, then we have a problem. So how many question 50s were deleted? How many question 35s were deleted? That's a pretty simple piece of information. Now, if you have this staff evaluation, and we look at the line item of their budget item, which is on page 6, I believe, of the supplement to the estimates, the supplementary details for the fiscal year 2004 and 5. Surely Mr. Warner can provide that information to us. I mean, this is not rocket science. Which teachers in which schools deleted which questions? And secondly, is it a true standardized exam when the teachers are allowed to do that, and furthermore, they mark their own exams? I'd like to have the minister's comments on those 2 points, please.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was pleased to hear that the honourable member does support a provincial testing program in his comments, and I do understand the context in which he's putting his questions. But testing does help us to be accountable to students, to parents, and it gives our partners information about how to improve student learning. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, whether anybody used the term standardized for that math exam this year. The honourable member is quite correct. It wasn't standardized, and he quite clearly articulated some reasons now why it wasn't. However, the exam was developed by teachers, it was reviewed by teachers, and the validity of the exam as a measure of the or reflecting the intended learning outcomes in the grade 12 mathematics program in Nova Scotia has not been questioned by anybody. The exam itself is a good exam. It adequately, and this is, you can ask virtually any teacher you wish who taught grade 12 mathematics, did that test try to measure the intended learning outcomes? And the answer clearly is going to be yes. Now, what happened, Mr. Speaker, and next year it will be standardized. Now, the reason it wasn't standardized this year primarily was the first thing, but what it does, and I think it's important that people understand this, for a variety of reasons, not all students or all teachers covered the same material. In other words, the same amount. Certain topics were left out, to be quite frank. Either they didn't have time to do them, they didn't move fast enough, or in some cases, to be quite candid, I expect it was felt mutually beneficial by everybody not to bother with that one. But the fact is, those exams did measure what students were supposed to learn. Teachers were given the opportunity and said if there was material we were not able to cover or whatever it is in our class for one reason or another, the instruction from the department was don't examine the students on those questions. It's not fair. So what you have is a situation, and I've yet to hear anybody say anything different, including from students, the very few that I heard from, is that they were to have been answering questions only on things they were expected to have learned and for which they had received instruction.
The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
The members should understand that if the question doesn't get answered, you ask it again. Will next year's exams be marked in Halifax?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I apologize. I would have answered that question. I didn't think you'd asked it. I didn't get that question. I would have answered. Next year's, the marking of next year's exam will follow the procedure was done this year. There will be a sample brought into Halifax and marked for comparative purposes. Mr. Speaker, you know, to have a central core of marking, and I guess if I had my druthers, that would be the thing. The expense of that is significant. And right now the feeling is that that money can better be allocated in classrooms.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you. The issue of standardized provincial exams isn't going away. I continue to hear from young men and women. I can bring up Haley Osborne's example. She needed a basic 65. She had 80s and everything else. Wants to get into St. Mary's. She can get in, but she's not qualified for any scholarships. But, you know, and I thank Haley for being in contact with me, and I thank her mother for being in contact with me. But I want to talk about are we really getting our value for dollar here when it comes to these standardized tests. Now, I see the line item I referred to earlier on page 6.6, where $1.487 million is allocated. That sort of number doesn't mean anything to me. So, again, and I mentioned the staff member involved, Joanna Redden. Joanna from the NDP caucus office contacted, through a FOIPOP, information on testing and evaluation. And on April 16th, we received back this document. And if it's acceptable, I don't know if the minister has it in front of him, it would be appropriate that he does. And it would be appropriate if one of his staff also has that document. And I want to look down at the background, the breakdown and the background of the Testing and Evaluation Division of the Department of Education. First, for the record, I think it's important you understand what this division in the Department of Education does. The Testing and Evaluation Division is responsible for all matters relating to student assessment, program evaluation, school improvement planning. The division develops, administers, and marks provincial, national, and international student assessments. It conducts professional development for teachers and the methodologies associated with student assessment practices. And the division administers parent, student, and teacher surveys in support of school improvements, planning, and publishes reports and guides to support student achievement. And that's a mandate that's worthy when it comes to communication and making sure that all the dollars are accounted for. But when you look at the breakdown, and for people who haven't followed it, and for members opposite or members of the third party who want copies of it, salaries and benefits are listed at $467,000. And then if you look at the next item is teacher meetings and professional development. Teacher meetings and professional development. $499,376.85. Now, before I go to the other columns, it's $500,000. And I'm not going to hotel rooms, and I'm not going to coffee, and I'm not going to that cheap shot that we always go through. Because people like to know about that. They spend $47,000 on that stuff. Your predecessor used to say it's the union's fault. It's part of the agreement. We got to feed them or they won't come. Well, I'll tell you something. Don't feed them. Go to them. So I want to know, in that $500,000 there, could you tell me what portion of that was used when we were looking at the grade 12 standardized, if I use the wrong term again, provincial exams?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask the honourable member to rephrase that question, because I don't know whether he's talking about the period of time during which the exam was developed, or the marking time, or the in-service for teachers, or could you just perhaps be a little more precise?
Member Timberley Prospect, could you be more specific?
$500,000, we can be as precise and take as much time as we can, I hope. Because if I look at the next column there, I see teacher substitute expenses. In fact, probably considering an email I received from a substitute, it should be called supply teachers, but that's another topic. Teacher substitute expenses, $160,772 for staff that I assume that's relieved of their duties to come to some kind of in-service work. I hope it's not all in Halifax, because there's more convenient ways to get teachers together. So I guess we could break it down this way. What number of teachers were involved at what expense to put together the grade 12 provincial exams?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Health, or of Education, excuse me.
In this particular year, there was actually a whole lot, but we will provide that information for the honourable member. I don't have that, and we're going to have to do some further analysis together.
Minister has agreed to an undertaking to provide that information to the member.
I look at the next column that's listed there for members, and if there are other people watching this, and it's include printing and shipping expenses, $197,303. I would assume that cost is to ship exams out and back, to make sure that appropriate instructions are included for the people who are receiving them at individual schools. But then I see operational expenses of $36,099. And I'd like to get some specifics, particularly when it comes to how much of that the printing and shipping expenses revolved around the grade 12 provincial exams.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have that detail with me, but we will be pleased to generate the information and see that the honourable member receives it.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Well, those answers, they disappoint me. I can be candid with you to that degree, I hope, without being accused of grandstanding on this. But we're talking $500,000. $500,000 when it comes to teacher meetings and professional development in this department of testing and evaluation. And professional development days play an important role across this province, although I know that some parents question the value of them, particularly the timing of them within service days. But I'm under the impression, maybe I could be corrected, probably I will be corrected, that these are meetings coordinated and directed by your staff, Mr. Minister, and that these teachers, through professional development, are dealing with assessment and evaluation, and they're coming to a central area, I would assume in a lot of cases Halifax. Is this, after all, one of the big ticket items when it comes down to those columns of numbers that the media, and yes, this member from Timberlea Prospect is always interested in the hotel bills or the use of these hotels for these meetings? Is that figure, are those numbers included in that $500,000?
Thank you, member. The Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, that would reflect professional development costs and for teachers' meetings, and of course there are administrative expenses in having those meetings. And I don't know whether the honourable member from Timberlea Prospect has ever been part of a task force for the department in his days when he was practicing in the field of education, but he would know that when you bring groups together and you bring people in from provinces or indeed into Truro, because I do know that they have held meetings there, and you have to find a facility, people have to stay. Certainly the administrative costs, yes, yeah, sure, there would be administrative costs included in that.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member from Timberlea Prospect.
Because you see, Mr. Minister, my concern comes down to, on this issue of standardized testing, are we really getting the best bang for our buck? Now we have, and you said these tests, especially the grade 12 math test, was a very credible exam this year. Now I would assume that if it's a good exam and a solid piece of testing of what was going on in classrooms across this province when it came to grade 12 math, that test could be used again. Perhaps not in its entirety this year, but it can be used and recycled. Probably the wrong term. Therefore, should there not be a saving over the next number of years when we look at these tests and how are we going to have the same expenses face us again next year with a cost of $500,000 in testing and evaluation? If we've got a good test, it has to be, if I can use this expression, tinkered with, then surely we won't see these types of expenses next year when it comes to another grade 12 math exam.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
I think the honourable member is partially right in that. Clearly, some of the basic work has been done, and he's absolutely right, is that the test is a valid one, and clearly the core questions, you can't simply repeat questions from year to year, although obviously precise questions, but clearly if it reflects what was expected to be learned, then there'll be a question on it next year. So the basis is right. The fact is that test is developed by teachers. Mr. Chairman, it's not developed by department staff. Obviously, department staff works with teachers, but in the protocols established for this grade 12 math test, which is really is the measurement of school accomplishment or school achievements, is something that is being demanded by the public more than ever before. the costs which are associated with the grade 12 math tests, there will probably be less this year than there were last year, simply because a lot of the groundwork has been done, and the cost this year, and I'm talking about putting the test together. I'm not talking about in-servicing teachers. The physical construction of the test or production of the test should be less, yes.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable Member for Timberlea Prospect.
Well, considering the staff that is in the testing and evaluation division, and considering that there is an evaluation consultant for literacy, an evaluation consultant for English, an evaluation consultant in French, all important jobs, I know. I'm wondering then, with this math exam, who from the staff coordinated the process?
Thank you, Member.
Sorry.
No. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, the initiative, of course, was led by the testing division. We didn't have a specific person on staff for whom that was a full-time responsibility. I would, again, be happy to provide the member with the names of people who did participate in that process. For example, I understand one of the people who was participant in that process was the math head, Sir John A. Macdonald High School.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Timberlea Prospect.
And I'm aware of that, but the concern is you're paying this staff, these people, to be the leaders, to do the coordination. The teachers are the ones who have the expertise on the ground, if that's the appropriate expression. The teachers are the ones who are delivering in the classroom each day, and I'm aware that Barry Walsh, along with other teachers, were involved in the process, but surely with the credibility and the importance of math, that there is a math, because I recall those days when there was a math consultant, there was a social studies consultant. Those were good old days, I guess we could say. So who coordinated the project? Who on your staff was the one who brought this issue together? Because at a cost of $499,000, $499,000, just for the members to repeat. I mean, these are dollars that someone has to be accountable for, and I would assume that a lot of it involves the grade 12 math exams.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
The ultimate responsibility is the director of the testing division. Mr. Chairman, I will have to find out if somebody was specifically engaged and paid to lead that process, and it's not unusual for the department, as it has for so many years, is to bring in either a practicing teacher or somebody who has some expertise from the public schools or recently retired to do that leadership. I don't have the name with me, if there was.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Timberlea Prospect.
Okay, I want to stay with this testing and evaluation, and I want to look in specifics at the grade 6 testing. And again, I come back to that $500,000 figure. I mean, when we talked about what portion of it was for grade 12 provincial exams, I didn't get an answer. But I'm not going to go down that road again of asking what portion of it was involved in the elementary school testing. But I want to direct the minister's attention to a column that really quite concerned me. It's entitled "Grammar Dismissed as, quote, drill and kill." And Stephen LaFoley is the author of the, could you, if you wouldn't mind, tabling that? there's a headline that provoked a few emails to my constituency office. It's from the Daily News of April 19th. And in this columnist is interviewing or has a comment from a member of your staff, and I've highlighted the part in big print so I can read it, but for the record, it says, also, the new time to learn strategy for reading and writing in the elementary schools mandates 90 to 120 minutes of daily instruction. And that is certainly commendable. But then the columnist goes on to write, but if students are not taught the fundamentals of English, such as grammar, then what are they doing every day for 120 minutes? And then that particular staff member who's commenting on this says the department dismisses English grammar work as drill and kill. I was wondering if you could comment on that for me, Mr. Minister.
Thank you, the Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, I haven't read the article to which he has referred, and if I could have a copy of that, it'd be helpful. What I want to tell the honourable member is that grammar indeed is an important part of the language arts program here in Nova Scotia, and indeed it's the language arts program that is used in Atlantic Canada. He will remember from his days in the public schools when the whole language program was brought in. Certainly I do, and it replaced what was then known as phonics. However, you will find that I think the approach to whole language, which he's absolutely right, was pretty pure when it was first introduced, has been moderated with a considerable degree of practicality. And I would be very surprised, Mr. Chairman, if you can find a classroom in this province where literacy skills, particularly spelling, grammar, and punctuation, are not part of the language arts program of studies. I happened to be at a Literacy Awards Day, I guess it was Monday, at the Redcliffe Elementary School, which is just outside the village of Bible Hill in my colleague in Colchester North constituency. They had a essay contest on a number of literacy things for grades 4 to 7. One of the judges, anyway, the person who was there that day was Mr. Bill Whalen, who was the former superintendent of schools in that district, and also a very well-respected educator throughout this province. One of the things that he said when he was talking about the results of the tests, I'm sorry, not of the tests, of the essays that were written for the students for the contest, was that he was very, very impressed with the detail, the language, the syntactical detail that was there, the grammar and the punctuation, the spelling. He complimented the students on that. Mr. Chairman, when I went to elementary school, we did a lot of drill and we did a lot of grammar and things like that. And I think it's probably done me in pretty good stead over the course of the years. And it's still done. It's just that I don't think spelling is a separate subject anymore, and I don't think grammar is a separate subject anymore. It's, as you remember, indeed at grade 11, for example, in grade 12 in the old system of provincial examinations, and there must be one or two people in this house that wrote those besides me, is that you used to have an English A and an English B examination, and grammar was a part of a formal rather than an incorporated part of the English language program right up through grade 12. And the approach to that, like it did in so many things, whether it's history or other social studies courses or mathematics, we can't live in the past. The new approaches work. I am prepared to say, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, that the young people who leave our schools today have never been better prepared at any time in our history. Young people in schools learn things in grade 7 that I learned in third-year university. it's amazing. You get into the sciences. It's what students are being asked to learn and how well the great majority of them are prepared when they leave high schools is truly, it's truly amazing. You know, the issue of grammar and writing skills, I have to say that I perhaps like to see a little bit of emphasis on that, but I think the time has come, the swing back has come, and there is more emphasis being put on that than there has been for some years.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Well, thank you for that tour down memory lane. I see the Minister of Health. You must have written that test too, did you? Or we administered it together somewhere that the Minister of Education is referring to. But, you know, that's fine. I know some teachers have been called old-fashioned teachers. And they're young teachers. They're old-fashioned teachers. You know, they insist upon sending home the spelling list when the student hands in the work, and they send home the spelling list and say, go over this with mom or dad because this is important. But there are administrators, not necessarily school principals, but school board administrators saying, don't do that. That's not the way we do it now. But they say that's what the parents want. And they are delivering the product that is, after all, most acceptable to these young people. But I do question to you that there are students in grades 7, 8, and 9, and you can say they're learning the things that you learned in third-year university. Many of them can't read the books. Many of them can't handle some of the skills that are necessary that they are being asked for. In fact, if I go back to this article written by Mr. Laffoley, he says, if students aren't taught the fundamentals, what use is the province reading and writing strategy? So, when we look at this grade 6 test, grammar obviously was not a big factor in putting the test together. Grammar was not, after all, one of, if I quote my friend from Halifax Citadel who said the other day to me, and I know he doesn't mind me using this, you set the bar low enough, everybody's going to pass. And if the first bar, when it comes to a grade 6 literacy test, is not grammar, but it's organization of ideas and how students express themselves. And you know, Mr. Minister, I can tell you, I've had teachers say that's all touchy-feely. That's touchy-feely. But when you have the opportunity to say to a teacher who has the student in grade 10, and you're the grade 6 teacher, and the teacher in grade 10 says to you, did you teach spelling to these kids? Because they're in grade 10 and they can't spell. They can't put a sentence together. But it seems they didn't do too badly on some of the grade 6 tests. So if you were consulting teachers, and if you were bringing, as your staff were bringing people in together to put this test together, as I assume you did, how come grammar didn't play a more important role?
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I am continuing to be amazed at the line of questioning of my honourable friend from Timberley Prospect. First of all, the grade 6 test is too easy. The grade 12 test is too hard. You know, teachers are all perfect, yet results are bad, so it's a fault of the Department of Education. Mr. Speaker, he is not really consistent in his approach to this thing. I want to answer, Mr. Chairman, with your permission. He had asked about the math, and I have that information for you now. The math team that led that exercise was David DeCoste, who is a university prof, it says here at Acadia, but I think David's at St. FX, if I'm not mistaken. Is that? I think he is. Is it Acadia? St. FX, isn't he? Sorry? David DeCoste, St. FX, isn't he? Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. See, St. FX, or he was there anyway, and he also was a math leader in the Antigonish School Board for some number of years, and I do know that I had worked with him when I was in the Department of Education doing school surveys. The math education evaluation coordinator was Marg Craig, and also a former math consultant with the department, Richard McKinnon, and also 11 math teachers. So I will table that for the honourable member. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell the honourable member that writing and grammar is a big part of the language arts curriculum or the literacy curriculum in the public schools in Nova Scotia. And indeed, in grade 4, among the materials that is given to every student is a grammar and writing handbook. Now, I do believe, probably, that the degree of emphasis on writing and spelling may vary from classroom to classroom. It's like the math tests. Some teachers did certain things, some teachers did not everything. Mr. Speaker, I just want to assure the honourable member of this House and all Nova Scotians that literacy for the public schools of Nova Scotia does include grammar and spelling.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Well, aside from the inconsistencies, you know, we're having an exchange here based upon a difference of ideas and whether teachers are being consulted. And teachers are being consulted in part of the process, and they were in the grade 12 math exam, and for various reasons there was a real true disconnect that students are wearing. Students I hear from are wearing. And now I hear from parents concerned about this process with the grade 6 situation, and I just want to take you through one of them. This is a parent from Pictou County who can't get access to the grade 6 results. Can't see. That's all in Halifax. It was all sent to Halifax. And this particular parent says, well, if my son, in this case, did not do well, I want to know why he didn't do well, and I want to have the opportunity to sit down with my son's teacher and go over that result. And she has been told by a member of the Pictou board, those results are in Halifax. We haven't got, when these parents went in to meet with their teachers and their children's teachers, and they were going over the grade 6 results, the results weren't there for the kids or for the parents to see. The results weren't there. So the piece of work that they did, which was determining how they did on this test, weren't there. Now, if any kind of strategy is involved at all in good parent-teacher communication, I mean, having gone through many of them, the best piece of proof is when you turn it around and say, Dad, Mom, have a look at this. And you've got the result that the student achieved or didn't achieve. And then again, you can say to the parent, and listen, if you want a copy of this, by the time the parent-teacher conference is over, I'll make a copy, and you can take it home, and you can go over it with Johnny, because Johnny has to address this and this and this as issues. Now, that is not the case with these grade 6 results. The grade 6 results are your son did not, in this case again, her son, did not meet expectations. But the results that the parents want to see, to lay their hands on, to be able to say, so what did he not achieve, is not available. Now, I've heard that complaint from not just this parent in Pictou County, but from other parents in my community. And I know everyone always says all I hear from are my ex-students who now have children in the school system, but is that the way to deliver the results? That's not the way to deliver the results. And I would like the minister to comment on the fact that if teachers are consulted, and this is a process that the department is involved in, when you lay the results out for the parents and you say, here it is, this is what he or she did not achieve, you have the piece of work that they did in the school system. Could you comment on that, please?
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, again, to imply that the teacher wouldn't have results is not probably an accurate representation. What you're talking about is, did the teacher have a copy of the test so they could give it to the teacher? Or give it to the parent? Is that what you were looking for? Just clarify that for me.
Okay, thank you. The member for Timberley Prospect.
It's a piece of writing. It's a piece of writing that was put together by a student. So why isn't the piece of writing available so the parent can see what Johnny didn't achieve?
Okay, thank you, Minister.
Of course, they did have the results by categories and strengths. It's all broken down into a grid. What I can tell the honourable member is if you would want to give me that parent's name, we'll look into it. I can understand the concern. It's not something that's filtered into my office, so I think the conferences, and as we know, there were somewhere around 10% of the students and parents who would have had those conferences. Feedback that I've had is that they went very well.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
I would like to talk as we continue on grade 6s. I mean, we all know the importance of literacy and especially having young people. And the press conference that we attended that day with that exceptional young teacher from Hillside, right? In Sackville? Yeah. The elementary school just next to H.A. Smeltzer. I want to address this issue because it's a concern that I have when it comes to libraries. Libraries. Maybe it's just in Timberley Prospect. I doubt it. But, you know, we have librarians. We don't have librarians, let's be clear on that. We have libraries that sit empty, in the dark, not being used. You no longer have the opportunity when you timetable your staff, because usually you take, if you're fortunate enough, you're a librarian, you would always have the opportunity of wanting to teach a couple of English classes. You know, they're very motivated, they want to be involved with the students. But not to have, and I see the recognition in some members' faces, and even the page for a change is looking and saying, I went to a school, didn't have a librarian. Now, all of us as older men or women are saying, no, that can't be the case. It is the case. Librarians are available in certain schools with the HRM because of supplementary funding. And I'm not going down that road at all. But I want you to know that at one time, there was a real commitment from the Department of Education on the role of the library service in this province. From what I've heard from some librarians, there's no problem with getting excuses of why it's no longer important, because after all, you allow the teachers to go in, turn the computers on, you allow the teachers to go in and go through the material, but who's ordering the books? Who's deciding what turns these kids on to what particular grade and level of reading? Who's deciding that? The expert should be the librarian. The librarian should be the one to say, and this is no reflection on the parent volunteers, this is no reflection on the assistants who work in libraries today. This is not them, but the ordering of books, the ordering of the materials is vital, because if you don't have a place where kids can drop in and pick up a copy of Bobby Orr's biography, only an example, Mr. Minister, Maurice Rocket Richard's biography, okay? If you don't have an opportunity, that's the sort of book that kids have got to gobble up. But you've got to be able to go in and get it, take it out, have it back in a week, in Bobby Orr's the next day, okay? Get it back to them in and out. But the role of librarians in this province is now non-existent. It's a very sad commentary, and I'd like to ask the Minister to comment on the situation.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
I want to say, just to begin, I don't know whether the question will eventually end up here or not, or perhaps one of the other members will be, but this department and this minister recognize the value of public libraries, and I know he's talking about school libraries, but and indeed, because the public library is both the only agency in this province where everybody has access to it, or access to it. It takes everybody. It's got something for people that read well. It's got books on tape for those and anyway, we made an additional significant contribution to public libraries in this province. And indeed, in the